to have a conversation about pro-Blackness and the immigrant rights movement. I want to introduce you all real quick to the folks that are going to be here with us today. So if we could just quickly go around, and if you all could just share your name, your pronoun, what organization you're with, and we'll dive into it.
I'm Feven. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm with Colorado People's Alliance.
Hi, I'm Donald from Families
Hola,
for
soy
Freedom.
Go ahead, Aneiry.
Hola, soy Aneiry, mi nombre de Nueva York, pertenezco a QDEP, uso pronombres personales femeninos.
And what organization are you with, Aneiry?
QDEP in Nueva York.
Yeah, sorry about that. My name is Donald, and I'm with Families for Freedom. We're based in New York. He, his.
Thank you, Donald. So we're going to be hearing shortly from folks on a couple of different questions, and we're hoping that this can just be an informative, educational conversation, but also a conversation that points us to some of the things that have to follow next in our movements, right? And as we continue to fight for a world where there is no detention, where Black and Brown communities can exist in their full selves. But before we do that, we want to share a quick video, and we're actually going to be silent while we share this video to honor the Black lives lost in immigrant detention since 2011. So I'll go ahead and just kick it off to our tech folks to see if they can play that video for us. We hold the name of all of these folks in our minds and our memories. We know that they rest in power, and we know that conversations like these are one of many that need to happen and are key, because there should be nobody in detention, and none of these lives should have been taken as early as they were due to the neglect and the dangerous violence that immigrant detention systems embody. So I'm going to shift this real quick to just start beginning to have that conversation that we want to have today, in honor of these folks, in honor of the folks who remain detained, about what it means to embody pro-Blackness in the immigrant rights movement. We know, right, that Black people who are immigrants are disproportionately impacted within the immigration enforcement system. We also know that their experience are nonetheless often not centered in the immigrant justice movement. And today we want to have a conversation with DWN members on the importance of embodying pro-Blackness and following the leadership of Black immigrants in the fight to dismantle and defund immigration enforcement and policing. So we're very grateful and lucky to have with us representatives from the immigrant rights movements who have demonstrated tremendous leadership, and to have a conversation with them about embodying pro-Blackness. So folks who are joining us right now, I have a few questions that I would just love to hear y'all's thoughts on. And, you know, if stuff comes up for you all too, like, share it with us. The first question that I would like to kick us off with is the question about how you would like to see Black people centered in the immigrant justice movement.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we know Black people are often for liberation that has not explicitly been led by Black people. And because this is our historical precedent, I think that centering Black people in the immigrant justice movement can only happen after a real acknowledgement of the consequences of decades of marginalizing Black people in the immigrant rights movement's messaging and its rhetoric, and its community engagement on a mass scale. For example, like we see narratives around like good immigrants, hardworking immigrants with no criminal records. And this is a narrative that is still prominent and has been perpetuated by non-Black immigrant leaders for decades. And it's one that overlooks the fact that Black immigrant communities and Black American communities have been hyper-criminalized and have been excluded from opportunities that many non-Black immigrants rely on to fit under that label of like good immigrant. And I think like narratives around respectability are still prominent, even while Black people are punished and brutalized, no matter how respectable they are, and often Black people are often used to depict the non-respectable. And so these are the narratives that the immigrant rights movement has historically depended on to make a case for a pathway to citizenship. And these narratives are inherently anti-Black because they have centered like capitalist and white supremacist standards for humanity and for existence. And there's an active consequence to those narratives, and some of which we're seeing now. So I think like, especially for non-Black immigrants, you don't go from years of not centering Black people in the immigrant rights movement to then leading on issues around anti-Blackness without first like reckoning with the active harm that has been done against Black immigrants and Black Americans as a result of the direct narratives that this movement has perpetuated. And I think, I think the immigrant rights movement will not be able to go from forgetting about Black people for decades and then suddenly centering them. There has to be a reckoning and an acknowledgement process by discussing anti-Blackness in the broader immigrant rights narrative. And there has to be a recognition of that active harm before there can be a meaningful extension of solidarity. But yeah, I think that's a first step.
Thank you so much, Feven. So Feven walked us through the importance of the historical acknowledgement of the harm that has already been perpetuated, that continues to be perpetuated. Aneiry, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, your response to that question.
Voy de la mano de lo que decía Feven. Creo de que algo que siempre ha hecho este país, que casi nunca ha hablado de nuestra negritud, nunca ha hablado de las cosas que nos toca, de los desafíos que tenemos como negros, pero las pocas veces que habla de nosotros es para hablar mal, ¿no? Las pocas veces que menciona al migrante, las pocas veces que menciona al negro, es para hablar de algunas cosas que quizás la minoría ha hecho mal, cuando sabemos de que tenemos una historia de grandes personas que han ayudado a la historia de este país. Sabemos de que este país fue construido por mano negra y gratuitamente por mano migrante. Entonces creo de que deberían de empezar a mencionar o a dar los créditos que merecemos por haber construido este país, y que en la historia de Estados Unidos hablen de todos los negros, de todos los migrantes que han hecho aportes importantes, porque cuando vamos y leemos la historia de este país, cuando nos preparamos para cualquier examen, te van a hablar de cualquier persona, que no estoy diciendo que tal vez no tiene ningún crédito, pero te van a hablar de cualquiera menos del aporte que ha hecho el negro. Entonces, es fácil que la sociedad piense que como negros hemos sido una carga porque no les han dicho, no, tenemos aportes dados por ellos. Entonces, es una manera de respetar nuestra cultura, de respetar nuestra raza y también de hacernos respetar socialmente cuando sepamos de que lo mismo que hacen nosotros lo estamos haciendo nosotros también para el bienestar de nuestra sociedad. Porque cuando hacemos una reforma en Estados Unidos, de una u otra manera, hacemos que el mundo la escuche y tocamos el mundo. Entonces hemos venido haciendo patria, hemos venido construyendo naciones a través de la historia, de todos los aportes que hemos hecho.
And I'm just going to give a quick summary of what Aneiry gave in English. So Aneiry very much agreed with some of the points that Feven brought up, bringing up the fact, that when stories are shared about the histories and lives of Black folks, and particularly Black immigrants, that there isn't a lifting up of the contributions, of the cultural contributions, of the historical contributions that they have given, not just to the movement, right, but to the history of this country, to the fact that this country was built on the labor and the oppression of Black folks. And so a lot of what Feven was sharing was the need to uplift those, to have that space to uplift the stories, the full stories of everything that Black folks have contributed to this country. And Donald, before I move us on to the next question, just curious to see if you have anything that you would like to add on that question.
Well, more of a historical component to what was said by Aneiry and Feven is that the current situation makes us believe that we have not been centered, or we have not been at the center of the immigrant rights movement, or even the movement that we now call Black Lives Matter. So if we just step back a bit historically, the UNIA, which was led by an Afro-immigrant, Marcus Garvey, created one of the largest Black movements in America that spread basically worldwide just by its influence. It helped to create the ANC. It's helped to start a whole bunch of things in Central America. It was run by an Afro-immigrant from Jamaica. It is easy to ignore that at times if you don't understand the history. And when we speak of centering Black folks in immigrant rights movement, there is a couple of obstacles and barriers that are easily overcome. But unfortunately, we focus ourselves on the most current thing, which is the good immigrant, the bad immigrant. Immigration on a wide spread started after the civil rights movement here in America, which was basically Black folks getting another form of advancement. The immigration that we see now came from those immigration laws from that time also. It's very easy to ignore our presence, because even before most immigrants come to the United States, we are already told, do not associate with African Americans, do not link with Black folks. And it doesn't matter if you're Black, white, brown, or whatever. So when we come into the country, we are already marginalizing the Afro presence that is here in the country. And it's rather difficult and also somewhat, if you speak to an American, hypocritical for us to come and now say, we need to get together and we need to do these things when we had mad opportunity to do it. So when we speak about centering, we must look at the historical part of what we played in this country, what we currently play. I, as an Afro-immigrant, when I came here, had to defend like if I was somebody else. I was told, go back on the banana boat. I was told all these things. But it is an effort to integrate and to link, because we have color and we have kin. The immigrant rights movement, unfortunately, section off and fall into the same trap with white supremacy permeates around the world. I think Feven touched on it, basically saying white supremacy. No immigrant from wherever they're coming from links with us. We didn't intend to come and live in Harlem or the South Bronx. The pictures that we see are the pictures of the white family advancing, and that's what most of us come to look for. The immigrant rights movement is dominated by, or was dominant by, I would say, the Latino immigrant. And that was the push. The Black Lives Matters now said, so where do we stand? You quoted before the amount of immigrants Black immigrants who get deported and who are arrested. It's because of the color of our skin. When we're talking about centering, we have to come to the point and understand where we came from and what was there before. There are bridges that were built for us to correspond and to go back and forth and build solidarity. We just have to maintain them and start to go back to some of those things. So when we say centering, I say, we're already here, we just need to do the work of reaching out sincerely.
Thank you, Donald. And I want to move us on to the next question. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of conversations happening right now about the various different types of ways that Black communities and Black immigrant communities are being criminalized and targeted in disproportionate ways. You all brought up these points too. But I'd like to hear on the other end, instead of these systems that we see that are perpetuating so much harm, what are some of the types of investments that you would actually like to see in your community? And maybe this time we can start it off with you, Aneiry.
Sí, cuando hablamos de las inversiones, siempre me pongo a pensar en las grandes desventajas que tenemos al ser negros dentro de este país y las grandes indiferencias que hacen en los proyectos con los cuales ayudan a la población. Algo que siento de que realmente necesitamos es ayuda en cuanto a viviendas, porque en los barrios, al menos aquí en la ciudad de Nueva York, en los barrios donde vivíamos los negros antes, que es Harlem, Bronx, han llegado a privatizar nuestros propios espacios cuando empiezan a solicitar crédito, empiezan a poner condiciones, tal cantidad de income al año para poder vivir en ese sector, y todo eso es privatizar el espacio para que nosotros no tengamos espacio, no tengamos el derecho a ello. Entonces creo de que se necesita hacer inversión en cuanto a housing, en un housing que esté adecuado para nosotros, para el income que nosotros tenemos, porque sabemos que no tenemos la misma oportunidad de empleo que tiene cualquier otra persona blanca. Entonces, creo de que necesitamos la inversión en cuanto a housing, en cuanto a seguros médicos y en educación, porque hay muchas personas negras de que no estamos estudiando porque tal vez somos buenas personas, pero no somos un estudiante de 10, entonces no tenemos acceso a una beca, a un financial aid que nos cubra. Entonces se quedan todas esas personas que pueden ayudar al engrandecimiento de este país, se quedan sin estudiar por no tener acceso a un sistema que les permita estudiar. Entonces, la única manera que podemos mejorar nuestra comunidad es mediante la educación o la preparación para nuestras vidas. Para ello necesitamos el acceso al lugar donde vivir, seguros médicos y acceso a educación. Creo de que en lugar de la policía, de ICE o de cualquier otro sistema que lo que hace es violentarnos, podemos implantar estos nuevos medios para que podamos vivir entre nosotros, porque muchas veces las personas se habla de qué va a pasar si quitamos la policía, que va a incrementar la inseguridad, y no es así, porque tenemos un sistema policial matándonos a causa de que nos distorsionamos en el cómo vivir entre nosotros mismos. Entonces empezamos a implementar reglas, empezamos a implementar cárceles, pero no educación para las personas, no educación para que podamos vivir entre nosotros mismos. Entonces necesitamos reformar una sociedad, volver a educar a una sociedad que aprenda a cómo vivir consigo misma, y de esa manera vamos a poder quitar todos estos fondos y implantarlos en maneras de vivir. Hay muchas personas que están allá afuera de que tienen tal vez problemas emocionales, problemas mentales, y los que necesitan es una ayuda para poder incorporarse a la sociedad, y no que lo estén recluyendo o metiendo en cárceles o cosas así, sino que tenemos que aprender a vivir con nosotros mismos, y para ello necesitamos tener estas oportunidades de vida, vivienda, educación y educación.
Thank you, Aneiry. And I'm just going to give a quick recap for those folks who are tuning in English. What Aneiry was getting to was just the various different ways in which Black communities are systemically discriminated and oppressed. She specifically talked about how, some of the neighborhoods in New York that have been historically Black neighborhoods, Black communities, are spaces that are seeing a tremendous amount of privatization and all these new sorts of restrictions and policies and rules that are very obviously meant to make it impossible for Black people to live where they have always lived in those communities. And so she mentioned wanting to see an intentional and deeper investment in housing, in the healthcare and medical well-being of Black communities, and education. And what she really was getting into was that, instead of the investment that is happening with police and with ICE, which are these agencies that perpetuate such tremendous violence against Black communities, that what Black communities need an investment in are the things that will allow them to actually to live full lives. So education, housing, medical, what Black communities are asking for are just the things that will allow them to actually live. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Donald, to see if you have anything. Sorry, not Donald. Feven, to see if there's anything that you would like to add.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Aneiry said in terms of, well, to specify it within like the immigrant rights movement, I do think that there could be a deeper and more intentional investment in grassroots justice movements for Black lives. A lot of the immigrant rights movements or organizations that work within immigrant justice have access to a realm of funding that grassroots justice movements for Black lives just don't have. And I think that there could be an ongoing investment in Black movements for justice, not only in times of crisis, but also just like consistently, and specifically investing in Black movement leaders who are fighting not just maybe explicitly for racial justice, but also like all around different forms of oppression. So Black movement leaders who are fighting on climate and economic and immigration and yeah, those issues, and leaning on Black leaders not only to tell their story or share their traumas, but also looking to Black leaders for strategy, for vision, for moving toward the future in all of our issue areas and where we envision ourselves going as an immigrant rights movement. And yeah, like just uplifting, like I want to see a push from immigrant rights movements in terms of uplifting the demands to defund the police as much as we have demands to abolish and defund ICE. So really pushing for the reallocation of funds from law enforcement and immigration enforcement to Black communities. Yeah.
Thank you so much, y'all. I have one last question for you all. And, it's just about the work that your organization is doing. What are the demands? Who are you pressuring? And what actions can folks be taking to support the work that you all are leading? So Donald, I don't know if you want to kick us off on that. Donald, you're on mute, by the way.
I don't think Donald got to answer the last question.
Yeah, so I'm on mute now. Well, I'm live now. In regards to what Families for Freedom is doing, we have never stopped or pushed to stop deportations. Based in New York, we started in 2002 because of what we saw was coming off from not only 9/11, but prior to that, the 1996 bills that made a whole bunch of our members who were predominantly Afro immigrants removable because of interaction with law enforcement. So we have never given that up. Constantly, we try to get people free. We're not lawyers or anything like that, but we hold that freedom is the most important thing. So we try a lot to try and get people out of detention centers. In regards to our demands, is always that we need to see a rollback or a repeal of the 1996 laws that have placed our people and have led to where we're at right now, notwithstanding whether or not you're a green card holder, asylum seeker, or whatever, DACA recipient. The 1996 laws is the ultimate reason why we're here at this moment, even having this conversation, because it started a process of exclusion, expulsion that have not been seen, and we haven't stopped yet. We haven't peaked, as they say, because as of today, or as 2 weeks ago, I think, 351 flights of people being removed. So our demands currently is to stop the flights, release the people in them from in detention, in particular regards to COVID, and those who are being detained prolonged. We have people in there who've been detained for 3 years because they cannot be removed, but they're not being released. And we are pressuring, we hope to pressure as much people as possible, but given the political climate, a non-US citizen doesn't have too much friends with the political power, because the bare fact that we're not citizens means that we are subject, we're pawns in their games, the political games. we can bring forward or try to elicit sympathy from elected officials. But as can be seen from my time here, I'm sure everybody's time, is that all the attempts to get us to the point of some form of balance or equality have fallen short. We're now dependent on the Supreme Court or legal maneuvers to give us our rights, our equal rights, our human rights. And when we talk about pressure, we're going to pressure as much people as possible to make sure that somewhere along the line, we do get our equal rights. Right now, we are out on the streets, even though the COVID, we haven't been out there for the last maybe 3 weeks, but we will continue to direct actions. We're looking to see if we can get a pardon panel started in New York State, based on the fact that a whole bunch of people might benefit from getting a pardon from the governor, which will help them in immigration cases. So those are some of the campaigns that we're doing. And folks can support this. Go on our website or Facebook and see the campaign for the pardon.
Donald, and I just realized I skipped you on the second question. Did you have something that you wanted to add on the second question around investments?
Do you have time?
We have a little bit of time.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with Aneiry and Feven in terms of the investments, but in particular, the investments that need to come within the movement itself. The investment don't have to always be monetary, even though that is great, but Afro immigrants, we look around in the room and we say, oh, there are 2 of us here, or there are 3 of us here. The space must be open. If you talk about investment, invest in us to be able to represent our point of view instead of somebody speaking for us. And that is also a tenet of Families for Freedom. The most impacted and the most directly affected are the ones who are best. We have the solutions. But because everything is so siloed, and investments and even the space, we look around and try to find maybe 3 or 4 numbers. There was an investment made by the movement when we created the Black Immigration Network. Unfortunately, it is defunct, but the foundation and the structures can be easily put together again. We were making some advancement even among the Congressional Black Caucus that we forced them to create an immigration task force. So at the very least, on the levels of power, that there was an Afro voice within the immigration movement or the immigration discussion among the policy makers. Things like that needs to start back over, and those are considered investments similar to housing and all those kind of things. But if we're talking within the movement, an investment and space must be made, true space, sincere space, and not transactional spaces either, like I come to your event. We're talking transformational investment that transforms how we deal with one another, because we're in the movement together, so we say. So I can go on, but I guess the timing is not that great.
Thank you so much for that, though, Donald. And I'll go back to the closing question that we had, which was share about the work that your organization is doing. What are your demands? Who are you pressuring? And what are the actions that you are taking that folks can get behind? We heard from Donald. Feven, could we hear from you next?
Yeah. So in Colorado, we're working a lot on, specifically within our organization, just uplifting demands for the defunding of the police, and really making sure that we're marrying that language with our work to defund ICE. When we talk about the incarceration of immigrants, it's crucial to recognize and center the history of mass incarceration of Black folks in this country. So we've been leading discussions with our members about how to fight for immigrant justice in a way that doesn't compromise on justice for Black lives. So this means that our campaigns, like they don't just end at the abolition of ICE or a pathway to citizenship, but our end game has to be to forever and always fight for the liberation of Black people from every oppressive system. And yeah, we're continuing to hold our elected officials accountable for the ways in which they've been complicit in voting for increased funding for ICE. and are currently fighting for local changes to policy to end the abuse of ICE and law enforcement within our local community. Yeah, and we're continuing to fight for the release of all people from detention facilities. And yeah.
And for folks to follow you, same as Donald, go to the social media, Facebook.
Yeah, Colorado People's Alliance. Facebook is just Colorado People's Alliance, and I think our Twitter is COPA Power, COPA Power, and then Colorado People's Alliance on Instagram as well.
Thank you, Feven. And to close us off, Aneiry, can you share a little bit about what QDEP is doing right now? What are you all, who are you pressuring and demands?
QDEP es una organización que va de la mano en ayudando a las personas LGBT negras y a las personas que viven con LGBT negras migrantes y a las personas que viven con VIH. Y lo que hacemos mayormente es conectarlas con los recursos que la ciudad o otros miembros o organizaciones puedan ofrecer. También damos el apoyo psicológico, bueno, conectándolos con psicólogos y hacemos reuniones una vez a la semana para que las personas puedan conocerse entre sí mismos y poder lidiar con la ansiedad, la depresión de estar solos en este país. Ahora mismo no nos estamos reuniendo porque por lo que está del coronavirus, pero básicamente eso es lo que hacemos, ayudar a las personas que están en detenciones, poder conectarlos con abogados de viviendas, y la manera en la que nos pueden apoyar siempre es, pueden ir a nuestras páginas, Cure the Time Empowerment Project, en nuestra página de Facebook, Instagram y Twitter, y ahí hay link para que nos puedan apoyar.
Thank you, Aneiry. So just a quick recap, Aneiry was sharing about all of the work that they do. Sorry, I just realized I was in the unmute. A quick recap from everything that Aneiry shared. She shared that the work that they do is focused on LGBTQ migrants and folks who are HIV positive. And it's a wide type of work that they do. Some of that entails connecting folks who they come across, who they're connecting with, to resources that the city and other organizations provide. It could be like finding lawyers, it could be in the arena of housing, in immediate needs. And we know from our engagement with QDEP as DWN also that they are actively part of Free Them All efforts in the area. And so what Aneiry was sharing is that to continue to plug into all the efforts that QDEP is doing, all that folks have to do is visit their social media pages, and there's always the need and different things that folks can be supporting. So with that, I'll just say one thing that I quickly wanted to add, or Aneiry, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the fundraiser that's going on for you right now. You want to invite folks to...
Sí.
Okay.
Sí, está bien. Yo soy una mujer transgénero que ahora mismo estoy preparándome para mi cirugía de reasignación de sexo, que va a ser en los próximos meses. Dentro de 2 meses estoy ahí ya casi para hacerlo. Ahora mismo estoy trabajando, pidiendo recaudaciones de fondo para poder hacerlo. No cuento con un seguro médico aquí en la ciudad de Nueva York. El seguro médico que tenía no cubre las cirugías y tenían muchos problemas para ello. Entonces mi cirugía va a ser en Pensilvania. Tiene un precio un poco elevado. Entonces por eso es que estoy pidiendo fondos, estoy pidiendo ayuda para con ello. Pueden hacerlo en Venmo, Aneiry-López Zapata, en Cash App, Aneiry96, y sí, son las únicas 2 que tengo. Cash App y Venmo. Lo estoy haciendo porque realmente quiero hacerme la cirugía. Siento que es algo que mi alma lo necesita. Me quiero abordar en ello, pero sí, estoy en el proceso para poder hacerme esa cirugía.
Thank you, Aneiry. Yeah, just flagging that, one of the things that folks can immediately do is provide that direct financial support if that's something that folks have access to. And Aneiry actually shared with us a fundraiser that's going on that we're going to drop in the comments in support of Aneiry. So if you have the funds available to you, please make sure to donate. And then the last thing that I wanted to give a quick shout out to or flag for folks is that tomorrow the Cameroonian American Council is going to be driving a phone tap. They're actually driving phone taps every Friday for about 40 immigrants that are detained in Pine Prairie and Louisiana who are Cameroonian, who have been consistently organizing to fight for their freedom. And, they're asking for support from folks outside. So I just wanted to flag that group, the Cameroonian American Council. Make sure to check out their social media tomorrow. You can also come to DWN's page and find information about them for the call details and all of that. So I think we're pretty much at time, but I'll just open up the space to anyone here to see if anyone has any closing thoughts or comments that they want to share with people right now.
Well, since no one is, I'll say I'm glad for the opportunity to participate, but also want to again emphasize that we have color and of kin in this movement. And it is mad important that we, again, instead of doing transactional solidarity, is to participate in what's called transformation, so that we change the way how the system looks at us and how we deal with each other and the problems that we are facing together. And again, I do appreciate the time to voice some of these concerns and have an input into this conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the other speakers. I actually learned a lot being on this panel with you all. So thank you for all of your thoughts. And yeah, just saying that these conversations have to be consistent and ongoing, and that transformational solidarity that Donald is talking about has to be built over a consistent amount of time, and hoping that while we're in a moment of crisis, that we carry on this moment further than that. Yeah.
Thank you, Donald and Feven, and to Aneiry as well for all of the wisdom that you all shared with us today in this space. And as you all said, we're hoping that this can be one of several conversations that have to continue happening, online spaces, but also like in our day-to-day engagements. So just a quick thank you once again to you all for everything that you brought into this space. And we'll be dropping links so that folks can follow up on the different items that were raised. But for now, that'll be it. And thank you so much to everyone who tuned in.
Thank you.